One of the concerns over the effort to redefine marriage is the impact on Christian ministries. We'll talk to one of those ministries about how they are responding to the looming threat of litigation this new law would bring. All of that coming up later in the program. But our headline for today, the National Defense Authorization Act, which specifies the annual budget for the military, has not yet been finalized for the fiscal year 2023. And this is one of those must-pass pieces of legislation that Congress needs to address every single year. Now, the military vaccine mandate remains a sticking point for approval for many GOP senators. Yet the Biden administration has shown no inclination to consider dropping the COVID jab mandate. Also, as observers of Congress know, the NDAA has long been a cudgel for Democrats to slip in controversial policy agenda items, such as items related to abortion, and in this case, banking protections for marijuana distributors. What else should we be monitoring in the NDAA as this congressional term wraps up this month? Joining me now to discuss all of it is Travis Weber. He's the Vice President for Policy and Government Affairs at FRC. Travis, good to see you today.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to get into all things military here, but before we get into the NDAA, I want to follow up on a story that we've been discussing this week from the academies. Specifically, the Naval Academy has denied that they are withholding diplomas from unvaccinated cadets, but they do admit that no religious exemptions have been granted. What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, they have not fully disclosed to the satisfaction of the members of Congress, including Congressman Greg Steube, who have asked them for information. They've not fully disclosed their processes and procedures, provided full transparency, provided clarity on what they're doing with regard to the withholding of diplomas from midshipmen who refuse to get vaccinated. I think, you know, the context around this story kind of speaks for itself, though, when we're at this point in the post-COVID situation in America. We've got litigation tying up military vaccine mandates in court, and the military has a crisis on its hands in terms of the recruitment and retention of service members, and you know, which gets at the health of our military and the ability to defend ourselves from the very threatening adversaries around the world. So when you look at all that, and you look at the lack of transparency on what they are even doing with after having invested education in these midshipmen for 4 years, and now apparently willing to at least withhold it or possibly flush that down the drain by not graduating them and allowing them to serve because of their desire to not be vaccinated. It's a real problem situation we're looking at. And you know, as someone who graduated from the Naval Academy myself over 20 years ago, back in 2002, I'm ashamed to look at the overall situation and really the really sad spot we're in as a country, where we're focused so much on something like this and so negligent about the many other things contributing to the lack of health in our military.
To that point, there are members of the U.S. Senate who have said they will fight on this issue and perhaps hold up the NDAA. And we've seen this many times in this narrowly divided Senate that we are currently operating under. You have to get 60 votes in order to move a piece of legislation to a vote. There's thought that there might be Republicans who are willing to hold this up unless those mandates are withdrawn by the White House. Do you think that really will happen?
It could. I mean, there's a lot of focus on the mandates, justifiably. You know, the discussion the country's had around the vaccine is one thing, but when it comes to forcing people to get the shot, and forcing an invasive process on their body in light of the discussion we've had as a country, the lack of full effectiveness of the vaccine, it's kind of absurd. So I think the attention is merited. We'll see if it's enough to put a hold on it. You know, as you've noted, the pressure to pass the National Defense Authorization Act is immense because of, you know, the desire to be seen as supportive of the troops. That's understandable. but we need to not let that be pressure, let that be something which causes us to buckle under the pressure of passing it and allowing problematic provisions to be attached, whatever they may be. And here at Family Research Council, we are concerned that pro-abortion provisions, anti-family provisions, gender identity-related provisions, and the liberalization and the increased legitimization of marijuana might be inserted into the bill. These are all things we're keeping an eye on, and we want to be sure that we have a clean NDAA, one that's actually funds the military, supports our troops, is not a vehicle for unrelated policy preferences.
And what we're up against is this tendency that has been in D.C. for a long time, of course, to take a piece of legislation that is important and should have bipartisan support and slip a bunch of controversial things in it to create partisan issues with the bill, and then try to accuse your opponents who might object to that, to objecting to the underlying idea of, for example, funding the military, which really nobody opposes funding the military. It's just what are the other things they want you to fund while you fund the military. Now, Travis, Senator Ted Cruz spoke this week about why he thinks the Biden administration continues to insist on COVID vaccines for service members, despite the evidence that they don't stop transmissions of COVID and that the military age population really is not especially vulnerable to this anyway. Here's what he said about the reason the administration is insisting on this. Let's play clip 4.
Will Chuck Schumer come out and say, you see, Republicans have suddenly decided they don't want to defend this nation? Of course. And that's actually where it's going to come down to you guys. It's going to come down to the press corps to report fairly. The reason we're fighting this fight is because we care deeply about defending the fighting men and women of the military. And what the Democrats are doing to them is wrong, it is unjustifiable, it is immoral. We are fighting this fight because we take our obligation to stand with those soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines very seriously.
Travis, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think he makes a great point, and we've all, many of us, I think, have heard instances, whether friends or family of members by now, of someone who really would like to serve in the military, but just can't take this social indoctrination, totally unrelated to fighting wars, indeed harmful to our focus on fighting wars, the social indoctrination, the wokeness that's being pushed, gender ideology, including forcing service members to be vaccinated in light of what we now know about the entire COVID situation. In light of all that, it's understandable that people are saying, well, I'm not sure if I want to enter into the military. I don't know if it's worth the hassle. Yeah. And when we're saying that, when people who otherwise are patriotic and want to serve the country are saying that, we know we have a military crisis on our hands. And the people pushing these woke ideologies, pushing this agenda on the military, are the ones to blame for that.
Yeah, Travis, we've talked here about the issue within the NDAA that the Republicans might raise about these mandates, and will they insist that these mandates be dropped as a condition of providing support to the NDAA and allowing it to advance and be passed. On the other hand, Democrats are also trying to slip some things into this. Now, they're referring one piece of that's become controversial. It's called the Safe Banking Act. And of course, everybody wants safe banking. So why is it controversial that they would be putting the Safe Banking Act into the NDAA?
Yeah, I mean, again, the name is where we have to zero in on, right? Because in actuality, it's not safe, and it doesn't really have to do with banking. It has to do with the liberalization and legitimization of marijuana in our society. This is something that should not be legitimized. The evidence increasingly is showing the harmful, destructive effects of the marijuana of today, the potent marijuana of today on individuals and families. You look to Colorado for evidence along these lines. So why do our nation's leaders want to legitimize this further and further? The bill...
Travis? And I think you were just going to get there. I'm trying to understand, what does the Safe Banking Act have to do with marijuana?
Yeah, the Safe Banking Act would enable banks and the financial system to process transactions related to marijuana more easily. And marijuana has been legalized in a number of states, but this will be a federal action that would liberalize marijuana further by facilitating it's spread through the banking system. It's unacceptable because the harms of marijuana are beyond clear. We should not be spreading it around further, increasingly legitimizing it. This bill would do that. So as a way to get it passed, we're seeing possible effort to attach it to the National Defense Authorization Act. That's clearly troubling.
Travis, sticking on this theme of the military for one more moment, a recent poll by the Reagan Defense Forum found that 62% of Americans think the military has become overly politicized. Can this be fixed?
Yeah, I think it can, but it's going to take some serious changes. It's going to take a U-turn on some of the things we've been doing as a country, some of the things I've already mentioned, pushing social agendas through the military instead of focusing on military preparation and readiness. I think this discussion is being had right now in the country. I think people are aware of this. But it's going to take a change at the top in terms of the culture of our military, the messages that are coming from the top about what people should be focused on in the military. If people feel the pressure to comply with these social agendas that are being pushed by the Biden administration and others, they themselves, they're probably going to either bear with it or choose not to serve. That's not effective. What we need is a U-turn on the policies that thus welcoming people who are patriotic and want to serve and don't want to deal with these crazy policies, but rather are there to serve their country. We need to do that. It's going to take some time, but I think it's clearly something that needs to be done.
It is in the national interest, and we're seeing over and over the way in which people are less interested in joining the military and the long-term effect that's going to have, not to mention the readiness of those who are currently in the military. This is metastasizing. It's creating problems. It is our obligation to continue monitoring this. Travis, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.